This year, U.S. oil production could increase by 1 million barrels a day, which is more than the entire increase in all the rest of the world. That would be a significant factor. And I think that Europe, as well as other countries, now regard U.S. LNG as a source of stability and security. But you can't build these things overnight. Pipelines take time. LNG facilities take time. Germany has said, Chancellor Schultz has talked in his Zeitenwende, his change of era, that Germany is now going to build receiving terminals for LNG, but it'll take 2 or 3 years to get those built. But that's so that they have to cut down on imports of Russian gas and be able to import LNG, some of which will come from the United States. And I think the trade that Germany had with Russia and that built up with Russia actually helped to erode, and with the Soviet Union helped to bring down the Iron Curtain. But I think Germany has now said, we're through. We don't want to be dependent upon Russia anymore. It's not a reliable supplier. It's an unwanted supplier. And I think that is more broadly affecting the overall economic relations, because remember, Germany is much more connected to Russia, as are other European countries, than the United States because of proximity. But they're saying, we're going to change and we're going to go in a different direction. We're going to increase our defense spending. We're going to strengthen NATO. This is all a big change. And one of the many miscalculations Putin has made, he wanted to undermine NATO. What he's done is reinvigorated NATO, and he's turned Germany in a very different direction. Well, you have to add up a lot of different things. You use the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. You get this kind of cooperation I've talked about between government and industry to manage the logistics. Obviously, some more oil from the Middle East would be helpful. And then you do have, whether we'll have some kind of demand restraint or people just changing behavior. But all of those things come together as this is a very tight spot that we're in right now. Some people from Washington went down to Caracas to see more oil. I think they ought to also go to Calgary in Canada and get some more oil, because I think the Canadians could help us out too, but they've been sort of forgotten. But I think China, Walter, that of course China is that's the big question. That's a huge geopolitical question for the 21st century, is U.S.-Chinese relations. And generally, they're going in the wrong direction. And that's really the real threat. So how to manage those relations, and given that the politics of the U.S. is increasingly antagonistic to China, and China is certainly increasingly antagonistic to the United States, that is it's a subject for another conversation, because it's so big and complex, and the risks are so. Germans made the decision over a weekend to shut down their nuclear power, which provided, I think, about 20% of the electricity. So they're using more gas, including Russian gas, to produce electricity. And they're shutting down at the end of the year their last 3 nuclear power plants. But I think we've seen a real turnaround on nuclear power. President Macron came into office saying that he was going to cut back on French nuclear, which provides about 80% of the electricity. He's now said they're going to build 6 new reactors and maybe another 8. Britain has just come out with a new energy security doctrine that also includes more nuclear. And going back to our CERAWeek conference, Walter, I heard a number of CEOs talk about small nuclear reactors as though these are going to be reality by the end of the decade. So I think there is a turn on nuclear power going on right now, seeing it as part of the mix, both for security and also for energy transition issues. We're looking not only at an energy crisis, but a food crisis. And Marine Le Pen has very cleverly pursued a campaign based on economic issues, less on immigration. And of course, she's touched people's pocketbooks. And so I think that goes back, Walter, to what we're talking about, the need to really manage where we are today, to avoid really big price spikes that will lead to the kind of political reaction that will undermine this unity. I mean, she said that, she's against NATO. So that's why you have to take a holistic view to this crisis and not look at it in different pieces. 30% of world wheat exports come from Ukraine and Russia, and a lot of that is just stopped. The Ukrainians can't use their ports, the crops will rot. They're a major exporter of eggs. You go down the list, you have all those things. And something else that people don't realize, But if you look at all the costs of food, about 70% of the cost of food actually is energy, from fertilizer, from tractors, from trucks to move it. And so all those energy costs also feed into the price of food. And the Middle East is particularly dependent upon wheat from Russia and Ukraine. And of course, it was high food prices that set off the Arab Spring in 2011, very much on the minds of leaders in that part of the world.